Hello and welcome along to the RTÉ Rugby podcast. We are deep into the business end of the season now. Champions and Challenge Cup finals are confirmed. Leinster and Bordeaux in the Champions Cup decider in Bilbao. Ulster and Montpellier to face off in the Challenge Cup final. And Ireland versus France weekend to come at the San Mamés Stadium in a couple of weeks' time. URC is back in focus for a couple of weeks though, but so much on the line with playoff spots up for grabs and 2 rounds to go. Connacht against Munster. The pick of them this weekend. Must win for Connacht. Also into the final couple of weeks of the Guinness Women's Six Nations. Hannah O'Connor will be joining me a little bit later on to look ahead at Ireland against Wales this Saturday. Before that, no Bernard Jackman with me this week. Brett Igoe will be in studio a little bit later on. Jonny Holland is also on the line. And Jonny, it's just the two of us for the next few minutes. But as I said, Leinster into the Champions Cup final for the 9th time. 29-25 winners against Toulon. A nervy ending to a game that probably shouldn't have been nervy with the way it was going. Bordeaux-Begles will be their opposition. 38-26 winners against Bath on Sunday. All the talk after that has been about TV directors. Let's start with Leinster, though. I feel like it was a game that nearly sums up their entire season. Closer than it should have been. Cards were in issues again. They appeared to be in control. Then there was a bit of a blip. The good stuff. Let's focus on the good stuff, though, because some of their attacking rugby at times was very, very crisp. Andrew Porter got on the ball so much more than we're used to seeing him, and it was really, really destructive with it. Scrum obliterated Toulon. And then also, we'll talk about the discipline, which isn't necessarily a good thing, but the way they handled the 2 yellow cards was particularly impressive. And that ultimately probably was the winning of the game for them.
Yeah, I think the frustration with Leinster is they can be so impressive. Like I wrote about their class disrupted by their discipline and errors, because up until the Jameson Gibson Park knock on, I thought they were so classy. Like their entries were efficient. Had they scored there, I thought it was going to be just a complete and utter formality. But they're definitely making things hard for themselves. And you could talk about all the different factors within that, but I think the positive spin on that is like they're not playing their best rugby. They're getting through anyway, and they're getting gritty wins, and there's a lot of resilience that comes with that, and maybe they're going into the final with less expectation and people having a cut off them, and obviously Leo's producing his narrative that the world is against them, and for the last couple of years they were cruising into finals and all the way on their shoulders, and now maybe they're ironically this is probably their year, isn't it? But as you said, there's so much good stuff within there. They're attacking rugby. Like they clearly look for Porter to get on the ball as well, because I'd say he turned up in a couple of moments in the 22, but there was also a peel off a line out where he came from the front of the line out. Normally you'd see your Jack Conan getting on that, but it was actually Andrew Porter they kind of maneuvered it for. So lots of positives in there. And then the other side of the coin, I know we'll speak about it in a couple of weeks properly, but with Bordeaux, they're not exactly bulletproof either. They're unbelievably talented, but on the day they can have a couple of their own errors, and they haven't lit up the top 14 either, so it's not unachievable at all. I think Leinster are in a really good position despite some of the negatives around their game.
The third quarter was where they really took a grip on the game, and specifically the first 5-6 minutes of the second half, when they actually started it down to 13 players. They 5-6 minutes later, once they actually got their players back, they had a man advantage when Toulouse were in the bin. But that was really down to just very, very smart work to start a second half. It was really interesting. Toulon had obviously got that score with a few minutes to go before half time. There was pretty much 40 minutes on the clock, and Leinster got a penalty just inside their own half. They were down to 13 players, and part of me was going, are they gonna try do something here? And I think Gibson Park smartly just took the ball, took a tap, and booted it out of play, get back into the changing rooms. And it was just a very, very smart second half to play with 13 players. Toulon tried to go a little bit wide too early to run it out of the 22. In the end, it was a poor box kick from Ben White. Tommy O'Brien comes up with a great catch. And then Leinster just hold on to that ball, build pressure for the next 4 or 5 minutes, get their try that they deserved for those few minutes of work, and from there had Toulon at arm's length. And I know Toulon obviously came back, but they were coming back because they were throwing the ball around, they were making it fast and loose. Leinster took control of the game at that point.
I think that's the impressive part of their game. Even with 13, they were able to put structure on the game and absolutely dictate the physical proceedings as well. Like, so not dissimilar to what I thought they did in the first quarter. The first and third quarters were where they won the game, and um, that's the huge positive of it, because I think when they've got clarity on what they're doing, and they've obviously got the individual quality as well to convert that. They don't need to do anything special. You can just see now they've definitely tried a little bit in their attack. You can see, like, after a first phase they get around the corner, they've got a little bit of a different shape. There's an outside forward going hard, and then there's the pot of three out the back, and there's kind of all sorts of layers to that attack. I don't think we've seen enough kind of effectiveness in that. Like, you see, Hugo Keenan was detaching, and they put the ball behind the forward to a pot of three. I think it was Doris probably in the middle of it, and then Keenan's coming on another hard line outside of that. I don't think the timing of that is great yet. I don't know how live they are, but the structure and the amount of options that they have at the line, you can see that they're trying to show different kind of patterns and more options and more layers in their attack. So a lot of it, I think there's loads that they're building, but you can only imagine how disruptive it's been. We don't see half of it. We don't get, well, I certainly don't get communication on half of, like, who they have available from week to week. I'd imagine training can be quite difficult. But the longer this season goes on, and I know it's finite, but the longer it could go on, the more you'd see Leinster get cohesive, I think. Which is why, I'm sure they're quietly confident in the background. But yeah, as you said, the third quarter was dominant. But I think the part of me around their defence, I think they're getting very overly competitive. Like, you see Doris, who I've seen people say he had a 10 out of 10 game. I can only call it, 9 and a bit out of 10 because of the penalties. Like, you can't, he's just so disruptive in the breakdown, which, the invisibility cloak seems to have disappeared a small bit, and he's getting in the way. And then I thought the two defensive penalties, one from Ringrose and one from Keenan, they're not malicious at all. Like, and they're slight timing errors. I think it was said on commentary that, for the Gary Ringrose one, I can't remember who was inside him, but you'd like for that person to have gotten a bit higher in their defence, because he's looking to be aggressive, and there's no reason why someone inside should kind of stay off. And then the timing is wrong, and they're hitting someone without the ball. But it's split second stuff. But at the same time, there's probably 5 or 6 penalties within there that they've disrupted all their flow, and all the good stuff gets kind of dampened by some of the disruption.
Yeah, I'll put a pin in you mentioned Caelan and Doris. I'll put a pin in that, because I'm going to talk about the discipline in a few minutes when Brett is here with us. And I think I would very much agree with you that Caelan Doris did some absolutely brilliant stuff, but the discipline does come into it as well, and it goes back with Ireland stuff as well, and giving away penalties like that. On out half, might talk about Harry Byrne, since you're in a good position to talk about out halves. It was a strange one for him, because I thought he contributed so much to the good attacking play Leinster had, particularly in the first half, bringing the ball to the line. He was, for the Jack Conan try, you could see he just, throws a little dummy, goes himself, and then Gibson Park goes back towards the right to Conan to score the try. But it was a tough day for him overall. He had a couple of missed kicks, made a couple of good conversions, but there's a penalty that doesn't go to touch. There's a restart that heads out over the in-goal area. Late on, Caelan Doris comes up with a brilliant turnover just inside his own 22, and Harry Byrne kicks it out on the full, and all of a sudden Leinster are back under pressure, and a try comes from it again. It was a real mixed bag performance from him. And you still probably think he is going to be the favourite to start in Bilbao a couple of weeks, particularly because Sam Prendergast had a tough afternoon when he came on. What do you do when you're in such a high profile position in a game like that? How difficult is it to just kind of flush those errors, flush a performance like that out of the system?
In my own experience, it can be quite tough, but players that get to a higher level obviously have a better ability to kind of wash that off, but there's some days that in my own experience anyway, you just feel like the ball is hitting funny parts of your foot, like your kicking game. That's what it felt like. His kicking game was off, because even after what was the sequence? He missed the kick at goal, and then he had a poor clearance, did he, after that? One that he would have been very... that gave Toulon a bit of an entry, and was it the restart after that went out in the full? So it was about 10 minutes. I think I clocked it. It was like 10 minutes on the clock, and I was like, geez, 3 errors in there. I actually forgot about the one late on. You're right, like forward, because at the time when I was thinking about it, you're going, forwards have worked really hard for it, and within a split second you put them back into a set piece, and they're not thanking you, so at the same time, you know, Harry Byrne's a really talented player. I've seen him since he just broke onto the AIL scene in Lansdowne. I think he scored 2 tries against us. I probably mentioned it on the podcast before, up in Lansdowne in the back pitch. And I remember at the time going, Jesus, there's another one. Like they're so talented. But he's I think he did really well in the attacking game. I actually had to stop myself from kind of error counting when I was watching it, because when you look at what they put together, as you say, I think he's instrumental in their attack, and we know how influential he can be from previous performances as well. So like sometimes you just have those games where the ball seems to hit the inside of your foot, or you're nearly looking up to see where it went, you know. And Harry Byrne's such a good kicker of the ball. He's got a brilliant strike. He's not like, that's how we started speaking about him again, wasn't it? He came back and started kicking a goal really consistently, and that's how he got back into the conversation. So to be honest, I think Leinster winning without a brilliant performance from an out half, it just adds another thing that won't go as wrong, I would say, the next time out. They won't get as many errors from their 10. I think the troubling thing from Leinster is that, or for Leinster, is that Sam Prendergast didn't come on and cause any headaches. Like that's the part that, as a coach, you're kind of going, well, I've got a freebie here, because none of the two of them have really shot the lights out, and they've picked Harry Byrne. I don't think he did enough wrong to take him out of the squad. There were kicking errors, but at the same time, Sam Prendergast didn't come on, unfortunately, and make anyone think too hard. So, as you say, I can't see anyone else starting that game besides Harry Byrne, and managing him through the next couple of weeks to get there.
Well, as if by magic, Brett Igoe has randomly appeared here on the couch in front of us. Brett,
great to be here again.
Thanks for joining us. Yeah, you ran into a bit of difficulty on the road in, but look, that happens on a Wednesday morning in Dublin. Perfect timing, though. We were talking about Leinster's win against Toulon, and we've talked about all the good stuff that came out of the game. Now it's time to talk about maybe some of the stuff that needs to work on, specifically the cards. 2 yellow cards for Leinster at the weekend. That's the third time this season they've gone down to 13 players. They're on 22 yellow cards out of 23 games across all competitions this season. And this email I'm about to read from a listener called MacDara, it's not specifically about Leinster's cards issue. This was actually sent before the match at the weekend. I just think it's very, very pertinent. So this is from MacDara. My son is playing with UL Bows. It's an exciting time to be involved with a club that's really well set up on and off the pitch. I'd like to hear your thoughts on how on-field discipline is managed behind the scenes at club and international level with professional teams. One aspect of elite professional rugby that has changed massively in the last 10 years is the stricter enforcement of the rules and the introduction of safety-focused rules around dangerous play and head collisions. I would like if you could talk about the role of discipline in determining the outcome of many games at international or at elite level. It would be great to quantify all of the conjecture with supporting data or expert knowledge. I believe that having an extra man on the field is a huge advantage that most top teams are capable of exploiting across top-tier professional rugby, and we rarely see any heroic 14-man victories anymore. Teams tend to put points on the board quickly once they get numerical advantage, and in some cases forcing additional cards or even being awarded a penalty try on top of the card as the ultimate double jeopardy punishment. You mentioned the double jeopardy part there. I think that's actually quite pertinent this week when you think about Leinster already down to 14 players. Discipline still goes awry. Harry Byrne follows into the bin as well. We're actually seeing more and more of those yellow cards given out after the try is scored. That seems to have crept in a lot over the last couple of years, and Leinster and Ireland have caught themselves on the wrong end of that.
Yeah, I think there was another card in the Bordeaux Bath game which was right on the score as well. The referee went back to it. Look, when you look at the stats at the end of the game, it shows Leinster gave away 7 penalties. So you can walk away going, well, we were under the 10 mark. We've reached our KPI, which is great. The issue I have is when Toulon had that huge momentum, we only gave away 1 penalty. However, there was actually 5 awarded when you actually go through it. So obviously the yellow card came for Porter's high shot. But if you go back again, there's 3 or 4 penalties before that, which the referee has warned. He's given Caelan a team warning. And when the team warning comes in, you've got to just put the handbrake up and just go, look, we're not going to give away any more. I thought the Harry Byrne one, he is offside. He's 1.5, 2 meters offside. And on the team warning, he left the referee with no choice but to give that yellow card. In terms of what goes on behind the scenes, the normal KPI is 8 or less. If we go back to those great All Black wins that Ireland had, we're giving away 4 or 5 penalties. That's in the whole game, which is an incredible one. But Leinster just seem to, when the pressure comes on, when the opposition turn the screw, whether they're trying to quell momentum or whether it's just the pressure of it, they just can't handle it. But I thought some of the penalties they gave away were like the Doris penalties. Like, he can't continue what he's doing. Like this, I'm going to go over, I'm going to put my hand on the ball and pretend I'm going to poach it and then ask the referee for forgiveness afterwards. With an RFU referee, they have them well marked. So he's not going to let you away with that. We're probably going to have an RFU referee for the final as well. So we have to do a lot of homework on that area.
It's very interesting you mentioned Doris. We can't keep giving away those specific penalties. While we were waiting for you to arrive, me and Jonny were kind of specifically talking about that, and that being an area where, okay, Caelan Doris had an unbelievable performance around the pitch. Like I think you're probably talking 35 plus carries and tackles combined. But as a captain, it's about standard setting, and I think that the penalty count, as you mentioned as well, isn't necessarily high for Leinster in a lot of these games, but it's the where and the when. It's giving away 3 or 4 penalties in the space of 3 or 4 minutes down around your own 22 and putting yourself under yellow card pressure. Jonny, you might talk about Caelan Doris. Is it important for a captain to be squeaky clean on those kind of things, setting the standard? Like if other players are looking at a captain giving away several penalties in a short period of time, and as we said, this goes back into the Six Nations with Ireland as well. I remember after the Ireland-Scotland game, Andy Farrell and Caelan Doris were sitting up. Doris had an unbelievable game, and Andy Farrell was asked about it, and he did kind of make a half little cheeky little remark about the penalties he was giving away as well at the time. But what's your overall thoughts on it, Jonny?
Yeah, I agree with Brett. I think he's gone slightly too far, but Caelan Doris is a guy that has huge moments in games. Like we spoke earlier about the turnover where Harry Byrne kicked it out on the full, and I suppose with that's a moment where he's taking pressure off his team, and he does that quite a bit. But at the moment, taking pressure off his team is not actually happening as much as putting himself under pressure and his team under pressure, because I think they're trying to solve the problem in the actual moment, and they've no patience around trying to get out of that pressure. So you can't just decide I'm going to fix it now by taking the ball back, and he's offside, so offside around the breakdown, still deciding that the rules don't apply or the laws don't apply to him, and trying to get away with it. So I actually think he's mostly responsible for Harry Byrne's yellow card. Like obviously Harry Byrne has gone offside through pressure and reported yellow card. They're deep in their own 22. But again, trying to be too aggressive, I think it goes back to their line speed in defence, and trying to be too aggressive at times where they just need to consolidate a small bit. And it's very hard to take the competitive edge away from a fella. That's the problem. But these are the players that traditionally Doris has gotten it right, and good leaders, good players get, they kind of know when to do it and when not to do it. But in your question on the captain, sometimes the captain will give away a penalty or two because they get so many moments across the game. The net positive is there to see, but at the moment,
sorry to interrupt. Do you think a captain nearly has a little bit of extra license to push a boundary a bit further than someone like Harry Byrne might be able to, because they have that pre-existing relationship with a referee and there's a bit of give and take there? I don't think it's about the referee. Not specifically on Doris, but just across the board.
Yeah, I don't think it's the referee. I think what I was trying to say there really was that their net positive outweighs. They end up with so many moments that most players kind of accept that they're going to probably cross the line at one stage or another, and you kind of accept that because when the pressure is on and you can't see yourself winning a game, they come up with a moment as well, and everyone's patting them on the back. So you kind of take the good with the bad, but at the moment there's just 1 or 2 moments on the wrong side of the ledger for Caelan Doris.
Yeah, the frustrating ones for me is the ones he's given away are preventable. Mm-hmm. They are definitely preventable. Like there's even a time where he's half swung around the ruck and he goes for the ball and Pearce just turns around and goes, "No, can't do it." He actually compliments him, says, "Well done," and then he moves on, and then he couldn't resist going for it again. You're like, oh, it's so frustrating. Like, say the coaching box are just tearing their hair out at this stage.
Like as coaches and analysts, when you're poring over games afterwards, and to go back on the penalty count itself not being too high, how much stock do you put into penalty count? Are you also totting up the penalty advantages that, the 3 penalty advantages that led to 1 penalty? Are you totting up the penalty advantages that didn't amount to anything because there was a 20-yard break and we didn't actually come back to it? Are you totting up all of them and going, do you know what? There's actually 14 infringements here, not not just 8 penalties.
Yeah, you're definitely counting up the true penalty count, not the ones that are actually awarded. You know, because if there's persistent issues around your defence, you're going to have to highlight that with players. Even the James Ryan one, which wasn't penalised, he is lying all over the ball. He hasn't made no attempt to roll away. That's one to show James, look, we can't afford to give that away in a final. So yeah, no, there is a true penalty count that you've got to tot up for a whole host of reasons, for player education alone. Yeah. I really got the impression they didn't really do much homework on Luke Pearce, because he is red hot in around those areas. Also, when you go for a jackal on the ball, you actually have to take it. He doesn't actually give it. Mm-hmm. So I think Josh, just before one of their tries in the first half, he has 2 hands on the ball, but he doesn't actually make an attempt to pull the ball away, to reef it off the ground. So he's actually, like, it looks like a penalty, and I know a lot of people on social media are saying it's definitely a penalty, but unless he actually pulls, but he will get that from 9 times out of 10 from other referees, but you're not going to get it against that particular referee.
And I suppose on the cards thing then, as we previously discussed, that period was actually probably the part of the game that won it for Leinster. Was the most impressive element of the match, the way they handled those 2 yellow cards and actually came out scoring a try at the end of it. But I suppose the warning sign is, if you go down to 13 players against Bordeaux, good night.
Yeah, they're going to be better organised. And like Toulon's attempt to exit or to move the ball at that stage, Leinster just filled the field. They played one in the backfield, 12 people across the line, and they just really, they were a bit clueless into what they were doing. You know, against that huge line speed. Then they had these kind of half-arsed box kicks that didn't really go anywhere. They did get one of them back and then lost the other. And then Leinster just clicked into this mode of, we're just going to carry hard. And Toulon had no answer for it, really.
After the game, Leo Cullen gave a pretty interesting press conference. I actually missed it at the time. I was inside doing player ratings after the match. I was cursing my luck having missed a very, very entertaining press conference, having sat through many poor ones over the years. But it was very strange. He was just asked to describe his general thoughts on the game, and specifically the last 10 minutes. I'm going to read out some quotes from it. The game had a bit of everything, didn't it? It's never going to go to script, is it? Then he goes on, kind of just talks through the main points of the game, how Leinster built up the lead, chances they missed, chances they scored. And then he gets down to towards the end of it. But that's where you have to show some guts and courage and chase back at the end. And that's just commitment. Naturally, you try and protect things, don't you? When the other team they've no protection, they're throwing everything at you. We were sitting in this room this time last year. We were in that situation. We were throwing everything at Northampton. Pollock gets a poach and it should have been a penalty, but nobody wants to report it after. We should have had a penalty try and no one wants to report on it. You just want to kick the boot into us, don't you? We'll keep battling. We know it'll be a tough final. We're delighted to get there ourselves. I have to applaud the players for their desire throughout the season to want to put themselves back in this situation, because you guys love throwing the boot into us, don't you? You love throwing the boot into us when things don't go well. Whatever sells, because you read plenty of it. You'd love if everyone got behind the team now, because you're up against the juggernauts of the game, because it's not an easy thing to do. Honestly, Brett, I'm not speaking on behalf of the whole Irish media here, but I would personally love to be talking about Leinster winning a Champions Cup, because I'm absolutely sick of trying to figure out original ways of talking about them losing finals and losing semi-finals. The idea that, I think a lot of people would probably say the Irish media are a little bit generous to Leinster.
Yeah. I've listened to it a few times, and I can't actually work out whether Leo has got really thin skin all of a sudden, which he never had as a player, or never had in his early days as coaching, because he's normally a very level-headed, thick-skinned, it's water off a duck's back sort of coach. And then I'm going, well, is this just a deflection tactic to get everyone talking about this? Because this is what we're talking about now. We don't really talk, we're not, and most media outlets are talking about his interview that he gave. Look, maybe he does feel like that. Maybe he does feel he doesn't get the rub of the green or the reporting that he deserves. I would have thought that the Irish media are very complimentary to what Leo has done and what Leinster have done over the last number of years. Yes, there is a frustration around it, but the media have to report why Geordie Barrett and question Leo why he didn't actually start that semi-final. he has to question why Cian Healy started that semi-final and Porter was on the bench. And there's a lot of, like, it's the media's job to ask questions. You know, if Leo's a bit uncomfortable with that, he's probably in the wrong sport now at this stage. And that's why I just thought it was so out of character what he actually said. I don't believe for one second that the media aren't supportive of Leinster at all. I think the media give him a pretty fair whack. I'm sure if he, like, in a past life, I worked in the Scottish Rugby Union. If he wants to know what the media are like there, have a go at it. Like poor Gregor Townsend's getting it on a regular basis because it is like tabloid journalism. But he doesn't have that here. Definitely not.
Yeah, I wonder how he'd fare coaching Munster, who are in the front and back pages nearly every second week. I would say there's a lot more scrutiny on them, and justifiably so, given performances over the last few years. But it does probably heighten, Jonny, I suppose, the stress and pressure that coaches are under. I think that is a very, very understandable element of it. And something he said further on afterwards, I think does kind of really shine a light on the pressure. And he was kind of talking about the nerves they had laid on. He says, you can see there's a natural bit of, I don't know, is it tension or what is it? There's definitely something in the performance there that we're not quite free. They're all humans. They're all trying to learn as they go along because they want something so badly. That's the thing about this tournament. You've heard some players talk about an obsession. I think that probably sums up the final quarter of that, or final 15 minutes of that game a lot better than anything else he said. Just there probably isn't a freeness to the way the players are playing because they're actually so invested in it. And, you know, as I think Bernard Jackman would have said last week with us, is there's scar tissue in there.
Yeah, and I think the expectation is huge on them now. You know, like they've lost a couple where, you know, people are actually calling for heads now, aren't they? Like people are questioning Leo for the first time properly in a long time, as far as I can remember. So I reckon the pressure is ratcheting up a small bit, and it goes across the squad. Like they openly spoke about the fifth star and haven't gotten there yet. So like there's a lot of pressure on them and there's a lot of expectation on them. But, you know, I think he speaks about the juggernauts of the game, and like, yeah, you can speak about French budgets and kind of firepower and star power, but what are Leinster like? They've got a well-protected team through the IRFU agreements, and they're all massive positives of Irish rugby and their system. Like, you know, and why we punch above our weight from a population perspective, not being the main sport and all the rest of it. But you can't then have a cut-off like, let's get behind us as Irish rugby. There's still provincial rivalry. There are still people that don't want Leinster to win. Like, and, you know, I think for the good of Irish rugby, everyone needs them to win. But, you know, he can't expect the whole country to get behind their push for a fifth star. I don't think that's fair. And I also don't think it's fair to call the other teams juggernauts. Like, don't tell me Leinster aren't at least on par with everyone outside of France, because they're above all of those, I would say. Yeah, you get the franchise player in Bath and everything else, but Leinster have an embarrassment of riches. Like, so we can't go talking about juggernauts in the game. They should absolutely be beating French opposition with how they're set up. So like, I don't really take that, and I think Leo is, I don't know, is it just his style of speaking, but there's a kind of confrontational edge where he's always asking the question back, like, we're under pressure, aren't we? Like, it's the way it goes, isn't it? You know, and I think there's kind of like, it feels more confrontational than it used to be. But to be fair to Leo, like, he's always been very level-headed in how he kind of recalls the game. Whether he takes notes very well or he can recall it very well, he always has a logical response. But there's a little bit of spikiness after coming in this year, and I think he's just sick of. Do you know what? Maybe it's going through the system, and they're having to repay some of their central contracts, and they're a victim of their own success. And there's a bit of bitterness, I think, creeping in because of that, and maybe they feel their hands are tied behind their back in reaching that fifth star through the IRFU and everything else. But, you know, speculation. I obviously it's very clear there's pressure there, and there's a lot going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, so that's Leinster through to the Champions Cup final. I'm sure we'll be talking more about Bordeaux as well. Noel McNamara, new contract as well, actually, by fantastic. The way, very quickly up to 2029. I think I was joking with you last night. Why would he put, you know, what's the attraction in Bordeaux? South of France, coaching probably the best backline in world rugby at the moment. I don't get it. Do you, Jonny?
No, we've actually spoken about it on car buses with a couple of the backs going, Jesus, look what he's coaching like. And to be fair now, we had a nice run of training against the Irish under-20s in Cork around that Christmas window where they'd come down and play development games and stuff like that. And I remember Noel bringing the team over and so well structured, lovely fella to speak to afterwards. And, you know, when you see an Irish coach going over to a club like that with star power and keeping them under control, bringing an edge to their attack, like we're all very happy for a fella like that, aren't we?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, he's doing a fantastic job, and it's there's going to be some kind of an Irish winner of the Champions Cup anyway. We know that for certain. Anyway, that was Leinster. Ulster, though, they capped off a great day for Irish rugby on Saturday. They beat Exeter 29-12, booking their Challenge Cup final place. They'll be in Bilbao as well against Montpellier on Friday, the 22nd of May, and looking to end a 20-year wait for silverware. So Arsenal got back to a Champions League final last night, first time since 2006. Is that an omen for Ulster 20 years on from when they win it? They'll be hoping Arsenal lose the Champions League final just to complete that set. But they were under a bit of pressure coming in, Brett. It was a bit of a sticky period for them given the injuries they had, form in the URC. They had a couple of bad defeats in a row. But that was a very, very professional and impressive win. First half was reasonable enough. It was a very close game. Ulster missed a couple of chances. But the way they just took control of it in the second half and ultimately one pulling up was very, very impressive.
Yeah, look, it's great for Richie and it's great for that Ulster project that's going on, that he does get to that final that they haven't got to in a number of years. The performance alone, I think Richie has a really, really strong 20 players. His challenge is going to be developing that next generation of player. I know he's brought the likes of Jack through, but he's going to have to find more back rowers. He's going to have to find more front rowers. Probably he has to do something similar to what Stewart's doing in Connacht and start bringing these younger players through, because like we saw that when his front line are rested, and this is going to be his challenge over the next 2 weeks, what does he do in terms of playing? And he's obviously got a number of injuries to key players. Does he rest them up? How's he going to approach these next 2 weeks? Because the next tier are probably not where Richie wants them to be, and he's got to try and bring them up to that level. In terms of performance on Saturday, I thought they were brilliant. I thought they were absolutely brilliant. 9, 10, 12 and 13 were absolutely outstanding. And then the pack itself, like they were producing quality ball for Jack to attack off. I thought they were brilliant. The combination in the midfield is fantastic to watch. I really hope McCluskey's not out for a long term there.
Yeah, that's going to be a really tough one. So big injury doubts over Stuart McCluskey and Jacob Stockdale for the final. McCluskey is a hamstring injury. He was getting a scan on it, as according to Ulster's injury update yesterday. Jacob Stockdale, though, I think you can say unlikely to be playing in a final at this stage. He's going to see a facial surgeon this week for a fractured cheekbone, I think, or a facial fracture, at least, I think is what Ulster said. So that's two huge injury dates. McCluskey, I thought was unbelievable. I just still can never get over his ability to carry the ball into contact so high in a way that you would not coach any player to do it. Because every time he runs into contact, you're thinking he's either going to get turned over, he's going to get held up in a choke tackle, he's going to get chopped down very, very easily. But his ability to just stay on his feet, secure the ball back, or even free his hands and get an offload is just incredible. But Jonny, I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk about your man. I don't know, Brett, do you know? Jonny has a long-standing bunch of shares in a man called Jude Postlethwaite. He got in quite young. He bought those shares very, very early. He's like the first man who bought a bit of Bitcoin. He's absolutely raking it in now.
Yeah, I don't know if you've heard about him, a young prospect in Irish rugby, but I have been speaking about him and I'm no talent ID expert, but Brett, I suppose we played against Armagh and we had James McNabney and Jude Postlethwaite destroying us in various moments in games, and like that, it's very similar to Neil, what you said about McCluskey, his ability. Actually, if you said, you wouldn't coach him, McCluskey's coaching Jude Postlethwaite and how to do it with the same frame. Maybe a small bit more speed. I'm not sure. I wouldn't like to put them on the starting gates, but he's like a carbon copy. The ability to offload out of contact. There was one where he was kind of nearly on the ground and the ball just popped out. And those kind of long levers that you see from McCluskey, like the twin towers inside in the midfield, and the ball just coming out, they're 6'4" each or whatever they are. But McCluskey can win that contact because he's about 150 kilos, isn't he? No, but he's well up above 110, like, and that's why he's winning contact and going in quite high. But I think Postlethwaite is in a similar vein. He's quite tall and rangy, but he's the same in on the defensive side of the ball. Like he's well able to get in over a breakdown and cause a lot of trouble. That's where I was like, Jesus, will this fella leave my ball alone? That's why he started speaking about him. So yeah, I'm gonna keep speaking about him. I think because I actually love watching him play. I think there's a lot of threat in that Ulster midfield, and another one that absolutely bypassed me. I've seen Jack Murphy play since he was in Clontarf, and I saw some headlines and a couple of articles last night. The 21-year-old, and I was like, Jesus, this is frightening. Like a 21-year-old, and he's so many games under his belt. And I think from people watching on the outside, it's hard to understand sometimes the age of these lads when you've seen them for so long, and you have to actually remind yourself that they're still young and they will make mistakes. And Jack Murphy has been so impressive within that Ulster squad. I think he hasn't been challenged enough with competition and all the rest of it, and obviously that will come. But to say the 21-year-old, I was Richie was speaking beforehand saying, "Oh, his mother's looking after him at home, and I might look after him inside and here in Ulster." And when you say he's 21, it does remind you like that these guys are really punching above their weight, and they're very exciting to watch. Like Neil, we would have said that they had the most amount of internationals that are about to break through, and I think that has started happening. So there's a lot of excitement there, but as Brett said, they need to back that up as well, because when they played against Munster, you were thinking, geez, all of a sudden that squad would compete in an AL final as opposed to a URC final.
Just on the Jack Murphy thing, I think it's a great advert for professional match minutes, because I think we've all visibly seen him grow over the season. He took a punt to leave his home province. He went off, and I believe he signed a contract before his dad. Well, that's the claim anyway. But I just think it's great that he's getting URC minutes, and he now looks really comfortable at that level. And it's just fantastic for Irish rugby that we have another 10 coming up through the ranks. Another one that we can have a big debate over again.
And I imagine I was going to say he's probably benefited from the fact that he's kind of been able to go about his business this season without a huge amount of scrutiny. We're always talking about Jack Crowley, Sam Prendergast, Harry Byrne, Kieran Frawley. Murphy's kind of just been able to quietly tip along. But at the same time, I imagine there is a significant amount of pressure that he's a 21-year-old and he's been thrust into the number 10 jersey by his father, who's the head coach. There's certainly going to be a lot of pressure with that as well. But at this stage, there's no debate over who Ulster's best out half is. He is by a distance.
Well, he's backed up the decision to move. He also backed up his dad's decision to select him. And I think what Richie's trying to do is he's trying to separate that he is actually the kid's dad. And I think the interaction and the interviews he's doing post-game are quite funny about, like, they do live together. They're in each other's pockets. They're like, you're going to work with your dad. And I just think they both have been so professional on this. But Richie has backed Jack to play, but he backed Jack, the rugby player. It's not though like he's backing Jack, his son. If like he has separated it. And I think Richie's been rewarded, and Jack has been rewarded for the performances, because there's no game you watch against Ulster you walk away going, Jack shouldn't be there. He should be there.
On the basis of what we saw over the weekend, they certainly have a chance against Montpellier, who weren't hugely impressive against the Dragons in their semi-final win. Regardless of what happens though, Jonny, whether it's a win or whether it's a defeat, how confident are you that Ulster and Richie Murphy can use this champion or Challenge Cup run as a stepping stone to something a little bit better? We saw Bath, for example, winning a Challenge Cup last season. I know they dropped down from the Champions Cup and won a Premiership the same year, but they've kind of kicked on again and are having another very, very good season. We saw Toulon do it a couple of years ago when they were on the way back up into a Champions Cup semi-final this year. I know domestically they're not going particularly well, but we have seen the Challenge Cup used as a stepping stone in the past for teams, but we've seen a lot of teams miss their opportunity and not really kick on as well.
Yeah, I don't think we'll see the same rise translating into the Champions Cup just because of, or even domestically because of the squad depth that Brett spoke about. But at the same time, we've spoken here for the guts of 18 months about Ulster and the Challenge Cup and what it's going to do for their young squad and everything else. So, like, don't get me wrong, the target has absolutely been kind of set out and achieved. I think that this is where they were supposed to go for this squad to bring belief and to bring players like Jack Murphy and co to another level of their game, and that's what they're achieving. I think win or lose, I think a good performance and lose, we'll still be speaking about them being a success. if they have a poor performance and win, obviously the same thing. But I think a poor performance and losing in the final would be kind of a little bit challenging. But at the same time, this is what we said they should be doing. They're gone the whole way in the tournament. I think domestically it's going to be hard in the next 2 weeks because of what we see in the drop off in their squad when they're trying to rest a few fellas or they get injuries. But this is absolutely where we saw them going in Irish rugby and representing Irish rugby, and two provincial sides in the two European competition finals. I think is brilliant for the game in Ireland, and they're full value for it. I love watching them play, to be fair, and they've got every chance.
Yeah, so that's Ulster booking a Challenge Cup semi-final against Montpellier. Jonny, thanks a million for joining us. We'll let you go now, and I know you're under a little bit of time pressure, and we'll kick on for a few more minutes and just touch on Munster and Connacht this weekend as well, and a bit of URC as well.
Thanks, lads.
See you, Jonny.
So, Brett, last point on Ulster, I suppose, is URC. They don't want to be going into a Challenge Cup final needing to win that to have Champions Cup rugby next season. They want to go into that just being able to focus on let's get a victory and let's lift a trophy at the end of the day. They're 8th place at the moment. They're 3 points ahead of Connacht. They face the top two in their final 2 games of the season. Stormers this Friday before Glasgow next Friday. Both of those at home, but as we said, they're dealing with some injuries at the moment, and they have obviously a final around the corner as well. Are we talking 1 or 2 victories? Munster, I presume they're going to be hoping Munster can do them a favour as well this weekend against Connacht, which we'll get to in a few minutes. But these final couple of weeks of the URC, if you just look at the table and you look at the amount of these teams that still have to play each other in these final couple of weeks, there's a huge amount of moving around to be done.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving around. Like, just looking at it, I think 9 teams can qualify for the 8 quarterfinal positions. Look, they're going to bank on Munster beating Connacht. If Connacht get a win, it puts Ulster under a bit of pressure. I think Richie has got to target one of those games. Knowing how competitive Richie is, he'll target both of them, but I'm just not too sure it would be the right idea to give that squad, let them go last week, the next 2 weeks, and then into a final. I just think it'd be really tough ask on the players to be able to do that. What I think he'll do is I think he might go strong this weekend and then rest up the following weekend against Glasgow. Yeah,
and I suppose if you even look at those 2 fixtures separately, even the Stormers one, I'm not saying Stormers or someone, Glasgow or Stormers are better than each other, but you have a team coming from South Africa and you have a team making a very, very short trip from just over the water. Yeah. It's not hard to see which one you can really go after. Plus, if you go after this week and you get your result, you probably can take your foot off the pedal next week.
And the other logic is Glasgow. The wheels seems to have come off Glasgow in the last number of weeks. They haven't really performed since their exit in the quarterfinals of the European Cup. So maybe they're there for the taking. Huge advantage to be at home for Ulster, but he definitely needs one win out of that.
Okay, so that is Ulster in action against Stormers on Friday night. Munster and Connacht then probably the pick of the weekend's games. A win for Munster this weekend, Saturday evening, 7:45 p.m. kickoff. A win for Munster this weekend, and they will guarantee a playoff spot. Not necessarily guarantee a Champions Cup spot, because that might still hinge on what Ulster do in a Challenge Cup and what happens there. But injuries piling up for them. Tadhg, Ollie Ager, Calvin Ash, Tom Farrell and Jean Klein all out for this weekend. Some of them, if not all, could potentially be out for the season as well. But for Munster, they've gone from a position where 3 or 4 weeks ago we're talking about, are they going to scrape over and get into a Champions Cup place? Are they going to just about get into the playoffs? They can be looking at these last 2 games and an Interpro against a team they know they're capable of beating, and a home game against the Lions. If they win these 2 games, never mind get top 8, they'll be in the top 4.
Yeah, they need a home quarterfinal. And I think the Munster fans need a quarterfinal, a home quarterfinal. As an organisation, they need a home quarterfinal. Going to Connacht, I do like the project that Stewart is doing out there, and I think that game in particular is going to be pretty tough. Connacht are probably one of the form teams of the URC at the moment. I know they had that one bad loss down in South Africa, but they had an incredible win down there too. Munster's injury rates, like losing Klein and losing Byrne, is just massive for them. It's huge. Do they have the backup for that? Not in terms of that quality, and they will miss them quite a bit. But look, they should be able to win that last home game as well. like Lions coming up. I know Lions are playing well, but
they've Leinster this week as well. It's a tough run in for them.
It is very tough.
Thankfully for them, they're up in third place in the table, so they've a bit of wiggle room. But it's funny, on Munster, we spoke about Leo Cullen and the siege mentality. There's obviously some of that going on at Munster, as there always is as well. They were doing media yesterday, and a couple of players were asked about dealing with the chaos off the pitch, which we'll get to in a few minutes. But Gavin Coombs, for example, says Munster is such a big club and it's always in the media. There's always something being said about Munster. That's all outside noise. And no matter what's going on, it's this group in the high performance centre. It's nothing to do with us. No one's been talking about it, and it's all been focused on what we can do at the weekend. I just think that's all outside noise, and we have this every year. Same last year when we came down to the last two games where we had to win and there was outside noise again. We're such a close group that we stick together and stay on task. And I think that's kind of what we've done. It's just always been part of this club, and I think it will be going forward as well. He certainly gets that part right. It always will be part of Munster. You can spin a headline whatever way it suits you. They're absolute masters at it down the years, and in fairness to them, they're doing it again.
Yeah, look, well, the house was on fire the last couple of weeks. They've ended up with 2 good wins, which got them into this position,
and performances as well.
And they've performed really well. But look, he's well media trained with some of those comments that he's made. But he's right. Their focus is to win rugby games, and what goes on in the boardroom and up higher is they can't control that. It's nothing really to do with them. They just have to put themselves in a position where they get their home quarter final, and he's right to focus on it.
And obviously they have some history that they can fall back on just in recent years of, from April onwards, they have started to click their season into gear on a pretty regular basis now over the last few years. Not even just 2023 when they went and won the title, but they went on that huge run in 2024 and probably made a mess of that semi-final against Glasgow. They had a real opportunity there to go on and win back-to-back titles. Last season as well, had a late rally, as Coombs mentioned, to get into the playoffs and lost that absolute thriller against the Sharks. I don't know, is it something to do with the way they play, the way they attack, where it's all that quick little passing? It probably is better suited to the fairer weather conditions and the better ground conditions.
Yeah, better ground conditions. They've been playing on an AstroTurf for most of the year, so we still have those elements. But yes, this time of year, it suits the way Prendergast wants to run the attack. It totally suits the way they want to play. They're a lot more ball in hand than they were 8-10 years ago, and it just suits them as players. Look, I'm glad he's recognised that Munster are a big club, because they are a big club. They're a huge club, and it's vital for all of us that they are in those in that last 8 and being competitive, which they have been. Don't be shocked if they don't go on a run, because their form is actually very, very good. You know, our focus is elsewhere, but on the field, they're playing really well.
You said obviously, like, Munster are a big club, and I think the way the Roger Randall saga played out over the last few weeks probably just does reinforce that they are such a big club in terms of status. Maybe not results wise over the last few years, but they are always a big story when they're in the news. And I think if they were a smaller organisation, the Roger Randall story probably wouldn't have caused the controversy and reaction it did over the last few weeks. Back on the hunt for an attack coach. They'll obviously need to get a forwards coach as well if Alex Codling is leaving. But what's the fallout of this saga going to be? Because it's really created a bit of a pickle with Clayton McMillan, who went to bat for the Roger Randall appointment. There's bound to be some tension there now. Then you also have the fallout of how the appointment came about. Not even just people's opinions on it, but the fallout of how it came about, with the process of how it was done. And it seems to have been railroaded through resignations from the professional games board and their commercial kind of voluntary group and stuff like that. There's a lot of repairing to be done over the summer months.
Yeah, look, it snowballed on them very, very quickly. I think the right decision has been made for the greater good of rugby. The situation they're now in, they have to go back to a pool of coaches that they have probably rejected in the past. So there's coaches that they would have interviewed and talked to and said, look, you're not our first choice now. So that'll be interesting to see whether they open lines of communications with those coaches again. Financially, no one knows what the financial ramifications are with all of this. Does that eat into a budget? Does it eat into a coaching budget in terms of who they can attract? It's also really late in the season as well to start trying to attract coaches, unless they're going to sit there and wait to see how the domestic leagues go and do coaches move on and are up available for work. The coaching market is very small. It's extremely small. So that's going to be really difficult to jump into. I will say, I do think as an organisation, I think Clayton McMillan needs to appoint the coach. I think he inherited a lot of coaches in the past, and I think he needs to find his man. Now, we know Roger Randall was his man, but he needs to be given another chance here to select someone that he can work with, someone that's aligned to his philosophy of the way he wants to bring the club forward.
On Connacht then, they're fully in must-win territory now. If it's very likely with the way other results go this weekend, if they lose on Saturday, they are out of the picture for Champions Cup, out of the picture for playoffs, and that top 8 is going to be set. It sets things up brilliantly. I suppose the optimism, I think, as you kind of said, obviously they're in form. They had that defeat to the Lions, but they have shown in the last few months that they've become good at compartmentalizing a bad game, like they had with the Montpellier game a few weeks ago, and they came back and had an excellent victory down in South Africa against the Stormers. They've become very, very good at putting a bad game aside.
Yeah, look, with the way Stuart has them set up, like Stuart trains with a lot of game scenarios. He puts them in these positions. He has his clock running at training. He gives the scenarios that they're facing, and the further they go in this project, the better they're becoming in these situations. So, like, to be honest, like 10 points down with 10 minutes to go, those sort of situations won't bother them because they'll have practiced those scenarios as they go. What's been so impressive, and I don't think anyone really saw it coming, was the amount of players that Stuart now has in the squad, which he probably didn't have at the start, that's comfortable at this level. You know, like the likes of Sean Naughton. It's interesting, Sean Naughton and Jack Murphy were in the same Leinster schools team together, and both were vying for 10s. Both left Leinster and they've gone away, one to Connacht, one to Ulster. They've been fantastic this season, and I've been really, really impressed with the way Sean has gone about it. Very impressed with the likes of Billy Bone, who's been absolutely fantastic too. But there's a whole host of players.
Sam Illo
is another one. He's come from Wesley College. Stuart has this fantastic ability to bring these people through, and it's for the project and for Irish rugby, this is just great. You know, he's going to continue it now. Jerry Kerr is now signed across, which, like, I know Leinster fans are jumping up and down going, Jerry's one of ours, but if you actually stop and think about it, well, we've got Porter, we have Boyle.
Yeah. When everyone comes back next year,
Jerry Kerr has, or whoever made the decision, whether it be Jerry Kerr, whether David Humphreys forced the move, I'm not privy to that information, but it's the correct decision for Irish rugby that he's gone here.
100%. And on that Jerry Kerr move, it obviously came the announcement came 24 hours after it was confirmed. Dennis Buckley is going to be leaving Connacht at the end of the season. Do you think that's a player that deserves his day in the sun? 275 games for Connacht. Only one player has ever played more. He's 36 years old in August. He specifically didn't say he's retiring. You definitely feel from that statement that he feels he has another season left in him somewhere, whether it's abroad, whether it's wherever, who knows. Probably over the last 20 years, the best player never to have played for Ireland.
Yeah,
I don't think there's any debate there. Got desperately unlucky in 2016 when I'd say if he hadn't got injured just before that summer, he probably would have got capped on the tour of South Africa. But a phenomenal career. Has like 275 games for the one province. 35 years old at the moment. It's fantastic career.
It's been an unbelievable career, and for him to last that long in a front row position as well, which is a really tough situation to be in, to play that amount of times for your province. Yeah, he is the most unluckiest. He'd probably term his career as being lucky. When I saw it being announced, I actually thought he was retiring, and I thought, oh, what a fantastic career. until someone told me no, he's actually looking for another gig, which is great. Like hopefully someone will pick him up. I don't know how probably not in Ireland, but hopefully someone away will recognise the experience that he has. He's unbelievable experience. I personally think someone should take him on as a player scrum coach. You know, that would be a great career for him to jump into that, because like 275 caps at that level, he's got some knowledge bank there.
I'm just so disappointed it's breaking up the incredible caps list. Anytime himself, Finlay Beelum and Dave Heffernan were starting together, every time you looked at it, Connacht would be posting up something on social media saying, you know, combined Connacht appearances of, I don't know, is it like 700 or 800 and
That's
something between the three of them. It's just so disappointing. We're not going to get that anymore. But no, fair play to Dennis Buckley, and I'm sure he's going to get a brilliant send off in what will probably be his final Dexcom Stadium appearance this weekend, because they're away in Edinburgh next week. But listen, that's Connacht against Munster this Saturday evening, 7:45 p.m. kickoff. A reminder as well, Ulster in action Friday night. They're taking on the Stormers, and Leinster face the Lions as well this weekend. That's it for this part of the show. Sport podcasts at rte.ie if you do want to get in touch. Brett, thanks for joining. I know it was a bit of a messy Wednesday morning, but we got there in the end. Jonny as well, thank you earlier on as well. Stay tuned though, coming up in just a second, I'll be talking to Hannah O'Connor, Guinness Women's Six Nations. Now then, the Guinness Women's Six Nations returns this week after a fallow week. Ireland hosting Wales on Saturday evening live on RT2 and RT Player at 6:30 p.m. up at Affidale Stadium in Belfast. Hannah O'Connor is with me again on the RTÉ Rugby podcast. Hannah, how are you? All set for this final leg of two games for the Six Nations?
Yeah, it kind of whets the appetite again, doesn't it? After the break week, you're mad to rip into it again. So yeah, excited for this one. Nice to finish with two home games. So you'd be hoping that Ireland would be lucky to finish strongly as they had started kind of against Italy with that home game. So yeah, here's hoping.
Yeah, even the layout of the championship, I think, has worked in Ireland's favour. As tough as it is to have those two away games against England and France in the opening 3 weekends, you know, you get through those games, you get the opportunity to have a week of mental and physical rest. Well, maybe not a full week, because they would have had a mini camp on kind of Thursday, Friday last week, but just a weekend free where you're able to kind of clear the mind and get things set for back-to-back home games and back-to-back games where Ireland are going to be favourites going into them.
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, it definitely has been a favourable draw for us in terms of that, of meeting the Englands and the Frances kind of early doors, from the sense of you're fresher, you can have a real proper crack at it. Not that you wouldn't have in previous years, but sometimes if you've lost bodies, it can be a hard thing to get yourself in the right space for going in against them. But yeah, it's really favoured us that, you know, we've given France a real good crack at that for that first 40 minutes in Clermont, and to come away with, you know, a disappointing result, to have a week, as you said, to refresh the bodies and minds, have the mini camp and get ready to rip into two home games. There's nothing like kind of getting you up for ripping into two home games to finish the competition off strongly. And as we mentioned before, that having not won 3 Six Nations games in a while, Ireland will be certainly looking to finish absolutely as strongly as they possibly can from these two, starting with this weekend.
Yeah, well, we'll rip into it with an email here. This is an email from Margaret, sportpodcasts at rte.ie, sportpodcasts at rte.ie, for anyone who does want to get in touch. As I said, this email from Margaret, Dan O'Brien may kick well, but she doesn't pose enough threat in attack. Why is she a fixture in the team? Katrina Finn looks like a great option to consider. 3 times player of the match in last year's Interpros, and scored a great winning try in last Sunday's All-Ireland League final. She plays centre as well and deserves some game time. Maybe discuss another option at 10, from Margaret. Now, people might agree or disagree whether or not Dan O'Brien poses a threat in attack, but I think there is a legitimate question in there, insofar as we've seen the first 3 games of this championship, how Dan O'Brien's been starting at 10. There hasn't been, you know, Stacey Flood has been the backup option at number 10, because Ireland have been going 6-2 on the bench. If you look back over the last couple of years, Dan has played significant minutes in almost every single game over the last couple of years. Now, it does mean she's a 22-year-old that's pushing 40 caps sometime soon over the next 12 months. But I suppose the wider question is probably, what happens if Dan O'Brien goes down? Do we need to be start to developing a couple of different out halves and a couple of different options at 10?
Yeah, I definitely think so because you mentioned it there. Like, I think Stacey and herself, like obviously Enya Breen is in there too, but having gone with a 6-2 split, you don't have a lot of depth at 10 or at 15 on the bench or on the pitch in terms of who can cover those two positions. So you do leave yourself a little bit scant in those positions. I think Dan offers a hell of a lot in both attack and, I think her defensive game has improved a decent amount since what we've seen of her last. And she's obviously a bit like the Sam Prendergast. She comes under severe pressure probably for that. I think that's improved, but I think her kicking game can't be overlooked in what she offers us. But that being said, like, yeah, there is the argument. Why not blood, younger players coming through, like as the emailer has said there, like being on the receiving end of it. Katrina Finn had played a huge role in UL Bows managing to beat us in that AIL final a couple of weeks ago. She's also gone on to link in and get minutes in with the under 21 squad and played another big role when they beat England by a tiny margin over there as well. So that was a huge scalp for them to take as well. So she is on form. She is, putting it out there in match performances and putting it into practice. So it's a case of, has she been able to do it in the senior training squad dynamic and training sessions? And does he give her enough of a backing to give it a go or to give her a space on the bench? As you mentioned, we have been going 6-2 a lot of the time, so it does change the dynamic of the bench a lot if we do resort back to that 5-3 split. But at the same time, there's the two arguments for it. You keep the consistency in what you have and look to finish with 3 wins from 3 at home and try to do that for the first time in a couple of years for us. Is that the biggest part of it? Or do you trust that you can rotate things a little bit and use this competition? We're not trying to qualify for a World Cup like it was in the previous years of trying to get ourselves into, positions of like combinations and the importance of that. Whereas I think, yeah, why not give someone else, where there's a lot of young players on that squad, including Katrina Finn, who have been putting up their hand up and are probably worthy of a shot of it. But I guess it's have they been able to do the training sessions? Have they been able to get their detail right and be able to kind of replicate that in front of the coaches worthy enough to get a spot? I guess remains to be seen when we see the squad come out for this weekend. I think we'll know a lot more of what his plans are for the last 2 games.
Yeah, there's a real balancing act to be done there, particularly at out half, because on what you can 100% see the logic in committing to Dan O'Brien and trying to get as much rugby as you can into her. Because as we said, she's a 22, maybe, or has she turned 23 maybe in the last week or so, I think, actually.
Yeah, she's about that, I think, yeah.
Yeah, so she's, early 23 at the very least. In theory, if you're getting the minutes and the caps into her, she'd be going to Australia in 3 and a bit years' time as a 50, 60 cap international player. All of a sudden is a hugely experienced player. But I suppose the risk with that, it's not so much that you're putting all of your eggs into her form. It's you're putting all of your eggs into the basket of her health as well. All of a sudden, if she pulled up with a hamstring injury this weekend, Ireland, Scott Bemand are in a situation where they don't really have a huge amount of options at out half and a very little experience. Even someone like Stacey Flood, who we've seen play at out half for Ireland, if you really look through it, she's played a very, very limited amount of international rugby for Ireland as an out half. It's like 80-90% of her rugby has come at full back, and it's been a few years now since we've seen her play at out half. So even just the idea of having a second option in case Dan O'Brien tweaks her hamstring is certainly important.
Yeah, I do think so. And I think you have to find that balance. As you said, yes, there's the two sides to it. You can get a hell of a lot of experience into Dan over the next few years before the next World Cup rolls around. But you've also, I think we've seen it in the Irish squad between the Crowley, Byrne, Prendergast dynamic of like there's nothing better than someone chomping at the bit and chasing someone's heels to try and get a shot at it too. And I suppose it was the much debated thing when the two boys were being interchanged in and out with each other in the men's game. There's the fine line to doing that. But I think Dana hasn't done a whole lot wrong to be losing a spot, but at the same time, as you mentioned, why not add the depth there that you're not just throwing someone at the deep end of a test match, that you're not just waiting for kind of a bit of a lull to put them in there, that, I think these 2 home games, how we're playing as a team would give a platform for perhaps change that dynamic on the bench split a little bit to give someone a little bit of minutes like the Katrina Finns, perhaps like a Niamh Gallagher, who's been going well in the PWR, perhaps is back up to 15. And again, maybe the coaches, I'm sure they have other contingency plans as to who's there to fill those spots. But it would be nice to see a little bit of an injection of something new in over the last 2 games to kind of give a bit of food for thought heading into the summer break.
It'd be true equality if we had an out half debate in Irish women's rugby to go alongside the men's team. That would be progress, wouldn't it? That would be true progress. I suppose to carry that point across the wider squad. over the first few years when Scott Bemand was in charge, we would have seen a long list of players coming in and out. There was a lot of chopping and changing, and while he still hasn't named the same team 2 games in a row as Ireland head coach, you can see, I suppose, through these opening 3 matches in the Six Nations that it was a much more concentrated group of players that he was selecting from. 27 players used across the 3 games so far. But even if you were to take from that 27, you've Grace Moore, Sive McGrath, Katie Whelan, whose minutes will be quite low from across those 3 games as well. So it's a very, very close-knit bunch of players there. Looking through the list of players who haven't featured so far in the championship, Beth Buttimer, Aoibhinn McGrath, Jemima Adams-Verling, Sophie Barrett, Ailish Quinn, Aoibhinn Riley, who has been out injured for those, certainly for the first 2 games anyway.
Yeah.
So there'd be an asterisk beside her. Katrina Finn, who we've mentioned, Niamh Gallagher, who you've mentioned, and Alana McInerney. Who of that bunch do you think is most likely to get an opportunity over these final games? I think it'd be very unlikely if we see all of them, obviously,
Yeah.
featuring over these 2 games. I can't see Scott Bemand completely rotating his squad all of a sudden. You'd imagine that it's still going to be a pretty tight selection bunch, but is there 1 or 2 players in that group you think could get some minutes?
Yeah, I think like obviously Aoibhinn Riley has the asterisk beside her because she's probably just ruled out through injury. She was probably based on Celtic Challenge performances before she picked up an unfortunate injury, was the inform 9 in Ireland at the time. So I know that she's been chomping at the bit to get back and is on track to be back, I think. So that could throw a spanner in the works if she's back in and available for selection. In terms of the others, it's a mix, as you said. Like, do you risk, like, say the likes of Beth Mudimer? Is she going to be deemed good enough to get in there and head of Niamh Jones, as Cliona Maloney is probably in the form of her life in terms of starting as Ireland's first choice 2, probably for the first time in a couple of years, and she's shown that she's reaping the rewards of that in her performances. But do you put Beth Buttimer in there instead of Niamh Jones and what she can offer, and do you take the opportunity to blood her with more minutes against 2 tough oppositions and what's to come? Or the likes of, say, Jemima Adams-Verling and Ailish Quinn have both got big minutes under their belt with the under-21s in their last 2 games against England, most recently last weekend, and Italy the weekend previous to that. So does he argue that they're getting their minutes there and that's exposing them to another level up? Does he feel that they've kind of shown enough in training with the senior team and with what they've shown on the under-21 circuit to be putting their hand up for selection? So yeah, to be honest, based on what we've seen so far, as you said, there's not been much kind of wiggle room for people, and I think how this selection goes this week will probably tell you a lot about whether he's going to do the same for the last week of the competition in terms of who's getting in and who's not getting in. But possibly maybe room for 1 or 2, but not looking like very likely if you were to go off what they've done so far.
Yeah, I suppose, as you said it as well, the under-21 series that's been going on has been a very useful crutch to be able to use to get minutes and get an opportunity to look at a lot of those players without necessarily having them in the senior match day squads as well.
Yeah.
On Beth Buttimer, she's someone I personally would just love to see get an opportunity over these next couple of games, because having been at Ireland games over this Six Nations, back through the World Cup as well, she's been there constantly. She's been there warming up before all the matches. She's been at all the training sessions, doing the throwing drills with Cliona, with Niamh Jones. And from the bits I've seen of her, personally, I think she actually has the best throw of the 3 of them. From the bits I've seen, I really just would love to see her get an opportunity across one of these next 2 matches. I don't know what your experience are of seeing him playing against her.
I've played against her a good bit, obviously, against Munster and against UL Bows. And yeah, she has got serious dart on her. And I suppose for Beth, obviously, she's still a really young player coming up through. As you said, she's got that unfortunate task, or fortunate at the start of your career, of being the TO, or that person that comes along as a travelling reserve with the team in case someone pulls up with an injury and you're waiting and hoping that you get bumped up the pecking order. But she has kind of filled that role at most match days, which, look, has given her a massive experience, and she'll know how match day works as the senior squad and knows how all the ins and outs of it go. And she got her minutes there last weekend against England in the under-21s. I think she was allowed a half an hour there as well. So, she'll be chomping at the bit for sure. I guess for Beth, it's a case of, can she put the throwing along with kind of the around the pitch performance as well, would be the biggest thing for her, is probably over the last few years that she's been trying to probably piece together it all together. She would have got great minutes in the Celtic Challenge as well. So yeah, I guess it's a case of you're trying to move to immovable objects in Niamh Jones and in Cliona Maloney McDonald. So it'll be a huge kudos to her if she manages to get the nod off him for any of the last 2 games.
Yeah, so Scott Bemand will be naming his team for Wales on Thursday morning. We probably won't find out too much between now and then. We'll have to wait and see how that goes. But I suppose, Hannah, just moving on this block of two games, we kind of alluded to it at the start of the podcast. The team has spoken quite openly over these last few weeks about, number one, they wanted to pick off a scalp away from home. That's not going to happen. They've had two reasonable performances on the road. Plenty to take away from those, from positives. But I suppose these last two home games, as I said, a point was made about the fact that they finished third in each of the last two Six Nations,
Hmm.
but it was a third place finish with 2 wins and 3 defeats. And I can't remember which player it was said it in the opening week of the championship, that it didn't really feel like a third place finish. As much as they were delighted to kind of get third, it would feel more real, and it would feel like a lot more progress if you were doing it with a positive win record over the course of the championship. And they obviously have the added challenge now over these last couple of weeks of, you're not going to France or you're going to Twickenham looking to pick off a scalp. Wales and Scotland are going to be coming over in these next 2 weeks. Maybe a little bit sick of the love Ireland have been getting over the last few months about you know, they've kind of been creating a little bit of gap between them. Scotland beat them last year, obviously in the Six Nations. There's going to be a bit of a target on the Irish backs over these next couple of weeks.
100%, and it's probably the two fixtures, the Welsh and the Scottish two fixtures of over the years. You'd probably feel, now English aside, but you'd probably feel the most spice in those fixtures and the physicality and the grudge that's there, because over the years we have been such tit for tat and kind of seen on that same footing. But as you said, like, yeah, we've put a number on Wales over the last couple of years, so they are not going to want to be coming over here and adding another loss. I think they're, what did we say, 8 losses on the bounce in the Six Nations, but their performances week on week, their most recent ones against England, yes, they went down with a 62-24 defeat, but they're taking a hell of a lot of solace from the fact that their attacking game looked decent, and they got 24 points, including the losing bonus, try scoring bonus point against the best in the world. So they will be clutching onto that and hoping to put their stamp on it. We've seen them against France hang in there like we did, put in a good 40 minutes against them. So they're not going to come over and just roll over. As you said, like, they're going to have a point to prove. They are going to be remembering kind of the last few years of what's happened to them versus us. And as you said, now we're the ones that can kind of be taken and have a scalp against us, considering, as you said, the love in that everybody's given Ireland and the green wave and the trajectory that it's on. But in terms of Ireland's focus, they're very much focused task in hand, and they will know, as you said, like the from the girls talking about it, they will want to be winning no less than these 3 games. Starting this weekend at home, big crowd up in Belfast. They always turn out in their droves. It's a huge opportunity to kind of right the wrongs against the France of last week's game and just be able to really put that kind of attacking flair to it, like we did when we brought Italy to Galway. The girls want to do the exact same for the travelling fans that are coming up to watch them as well. So yeah, a lot on offer, but a big point to prove for both sides for various different reasons.
And I suppose there is a significant milestone in, if they were to kind of finish off this campaign strong. While you want to be closing the gap on the top 4 in the world, your England, France, New Zealand, Canada, you do also want to be putting a bit of distance between yourself and those behind you.
Yeah, 100%. And you said it there, like it said, you want to be putting that distance behind them, and the way you do that is with emphatic wins, especially, as you said, with the 3 matches being at home against the teams that we know we should be beating week in and week out. So, like, to do that will really just put a statement on all the talk that has gone before the tournament of where the girls want to be, where they want to be challenging and chasing after the way, or the France and then the England. And yes, where our matches against them didn't go as we wanted, there were still those shoots that it's getting closer and closer. But that won't matter anything if we don't manage to get 2 solid results, 2 big wins against these next 2 weeks against the Wales and the Scotland.
On Wales specifically, then we'll talk
Yes.
about Scotland a bit more next week.
Yeah.
It's been quite interesting with Wales, because I think if you were to, coming into this championship, if you were to base things on last year's Six Nations, the World Cup, it sort of felt like Wales were on the way down, Scotland were on the way up. The first 3 rounds of this Six Nations would probably have you thinking otherwise. I know Scotland beat Wales in the opening round,
Just.
but since then, yeah, exactly. But since then, Scotland have had 2 pretty poor defeats. And I know Wales are still yet to pick up a victory, but they're going to be taking a lot from landing a few blows on England the other day as well. They didn't get hammered by France. They stuck around with France for a good
Yeah.
while and made a real game of it. They seem to have made significant strides since the since the World Cup.
Yeah, and I think for them, obviously, Sean Lynn has come in from Gloucester Hartpury, where he'd done great things over there. He's a Welsh man. He gets the pride, gets the passion, gets what the culture is about. And I think for him, we've seen it with Ireland. It's obviously going to take a little while longer to build it and to get the kind of identity that he wants. And what you see with the Welsh team is always that passion that they bring, which is undoubted, undeniable in any team that plays for their, or any people that play for their country. But I just would think with Wales, they're still a little bit off probably where they want to be. They've shipped a few injuries in their back row, particularly they've lost their captain Kate Williams, along with I think they've lost a winger as well, Catherine Richards is out as well. So they've been unfortunate with a few injuries in key positions, and obviously will welcome back Hannah Dallavalle and Karis Cox to the centres this weekend, which will give them a huge boost. But they're just a little bit off where Ireland are in terms of kind of their pathway. I think we see with Wales with Clecky George at 10, they're probably on stats the most kicking team in the competition. But what they offered there, we've seen in matches where they struggle, is that they can't quite get the territory gain that Ireland can get. A lot of teams, we've seen it with France putting her under pressure with Pauline Bourdon-Sansu charging at her. It takes a hell of a lot of distance off it. And then unfortunately, because I think Wales, in terms of the conditioning piece, they're probably not as dynamic a pack as Ireland are, or other teams like your France's or your England's, that they find themselves struggling to negate the counter-attack that comes from those kind of loose kicks. So where she's a massive kick threat for them, I think they probably put a bit too much emphasis on it to actually be able to implement a game plan off it successfully. And I think Ireland will be looking to put massive pressure on her, because if we can nullify her game plan, we saw 2 years ago down in Cork, if you could nullify that game plan, Wales really do struggle to kind of get firing and get a bit of traction in their game plan. So yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting one this weekend. And as you said, they're not going to lie down and take it. They will come and they will stay in the fight for the full 80 minutes, and it's up to Ireland to be able to play their game plan and be able to do all the good things that they've done in the first couple of rounds and kind of kick it on from there to finish well.
Yeah, I was going to mention the kicking. It's mad when you look at the stats. Wales leading 87 kicks across the opening 3 games. It's 19 more than the second place team. It's 35 kicks more than Ireland have in the opening 3 rounds. So you're talking like 11, 12 kicks per game more than Ireland are taking. The other area of the game where, if you look through the stats where Wales are jumping out, is on turnovers won. They have 29 turnovers won, which is the best in the championship, just ahead of Ireland. So it's the top 2. A bit of a battle of the back rows on Saturday evening.
Yeah, it will. Like, as I said, Bethan Lewis, she's kind of been a stalwart for Wales the last couple of years and gets the nod as captain now in kind of the absence of Kate Williams. But themselves, I think there's a few of them in there that all love a jackal. It's kind of their trademark of where they're back rowers. You're always going to meet physical back rowers, love getting stuck in. I think they're missing Alex Callender obviously as well, but it is a carbon copy of a Welsh back rower that they will tackle hard, bounce, look to get the jackal and feed off most of that scraps that they're getting. We saw it against England last week as well. It was similar form, that they will always go for that jackal every time. They'll pack serious punch up front in their front row as well, which will give Ireland lots of questions at scrum time. So we could be in for a real good battle when you think like for like in terms of the likes of Brittany Hoke and Erin King and Aoife Waver wanting to do the exact same things if they go head for head on Saturday night.
And just finally, then, one other element of the Welsh game, particularly in light of the 4 tries they scored against England the other week, but also if you go back to the Six Nations meeting between these two in Newport last year, I was over at it, and while Ireland won comfortably in the end, 40-14, Wales did strike from deep quite a bit, caused Ireland a few problems just running at them. And it has been a theme we've kind of seen with Ireland that, against France the other week, when Ireland really, really struggled, it's when the game became fractured. It's when France were throwing the ball around and spreading the field. I suppose the crucial element for Ireland this week is to make sure the game does not become loose, the game does not become fractured, as it did against Italy when Ireland conceded a few sloppy tries as well along the way. That's probably the biggest area of the game where Ireland can be got at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. You mentioned it there. Like we got cut open by Italy when they decided to run one back early on in that game as well. So teams will be eyeing that up against Ireland and know that once Dana puts that boot to ball and puts it up the air, that there is opportunity for counter. And Wales, they have the players there. They have Jazz Joyce Butchers, who is no slouch, along with a few others in their back 3, whoever they decide to opt to go for. And they have a few young under 21 players who've been blooded into that squad due to those injuries, who are seriously packing a punch in terms of pace as well. Like Freya Bell has come in as a centre and they're no slouches. So like they will be looking to put their hand up and making a stamp on it from their point of view. But Ireland definitely, in terms of the biggest work on from the first kind of couple of games or rounds, in that second half, particularly we saw against France, as you mentioned, that we just get a bit loose and a bit, that's literally the only word for it, unstructured, when we're cut open by those teams who are a bit superior in the power game than us. So that would be something that they'd be looking to nullify against Wales and not give them room to breathe, because it said if they get an inch, they'll take a mile, and they will stay in that fight for as long as you think that, or as long as they think that they're capable of it. So yeah, it's a very important one for Ireland. I think as well, what would be nice to see from an Ireland point of view is of that. We saw flashes of it against Italy and Galway, is that playing off the cuff, playing that heads up rugby, unstructured play. You know, we saw it for Bevan Parsons' third try in Galway. That was peak Ireland, just playing heads up rugby. And I think in that second half of this game this weekend, I'd like to see Ireland do the same, that when the bench comes on and when everything happens, that yes, we can keep it in the structure, but also be able to play our own bit of flair and put our kind of attacking game into an area that's, it doesn't have to always be perfection pod or like getting to the width. We've seen it at times in those games against the likes of the Englands and the Frances, that we sometimes are trying so hard to get to width that we lack that shape or lack that punch through the middle. So a bit of variety from Ireland to mix in with Dana's kicking or whoever gets the nod at 10. But yeah, it would be nice to show a bit of variety in our attacking game, I think, as we go through the depths of these two rounds to come.
Good stuff. Well, as I said, that is Ireland against Wales, 6:30 kickoff on Saturday evening in Belfast, live on RT2 and RTÉ Player. You can also listen to live commentary on Saturday Sport on RTÉ Radio 1. The other two fixtures this Saturday, it's a triple header on Saturday. Italy against England, 2 p.m. kickoff, and Scotland hosting France. Then that's in between Italy and England, and Ireland Wales, 4:15 p.m. start for that as well. Hannah, thanks a million for joining us on the podcast as always. Sport podcasts at rte.ie if you want to get in touch as well, and we'll do our best to touch on every email we do get, so do get those emails into us. Thanks a million as always, and we'll speak to you again soon.